Hey guys, Savage Recovery back for another video. So the topic tonight is about marriage and the problems that are going to be coming down the line. These two articles, I believe, are going to help showcase the fact that men are going to evaluate the risk and more men are going to walk away from marriage. It's unfortunate. Society is going to really feel the brunt of it, but being as men typically do things that are based on risk and benefit. This goes to show you that the risk just keeps getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse, and it's really not getting any better. So let's get into why marriage is going to start to things like this are going to push marriage to start declining more. Okay, so with this first article, here, we're going to show okay, so here's the article. Now this is in Europe. So this obviously is not in the States as of right now. And this article itself is an old article, but so this right here is the article. This is a 4-year-old article. So at the end of the day, this stuff is going to keep progressing towards us. So the green energy tycoon Dale Vince has called for a time limit on divorce cash claims after agreeing to pay his ex-wife £300,000 in a financial settlement. His wife initially sought £1.9 million from the founder of Ecotricity in a claim lodged more than 25 years after the couple separated and nearly 20 years since their divorce. Vince is a former New Age traveler who became a millionaire businessman long after the couple parted. There was a long battle over whether her claim could proceed, which White later won in Supreme Court. Vince described it as mad decision. The High Court family judge, Mr. Cobb, sitting in London, approved that the pair's decision to settle with the modest award to Wyatt and said it represented a realistic and balanced appraisal of the unusual circumstances of this case. So what's the unusual circumstances of this case is more on the idea that this woman divorced a man and 20 years later decided to go back and try to get money from him because he became successful. That's what is weird. It's not weird that a woman tried to get money from him. It's weird the court was like, yeah, that makes sense. So the High Court family judge sitting in, okay, how much Wyatt will actually receive remains uncertain because the outstanding legal bills, which have yet to be fully quantified. White, 55, and Vince, 53. I can't pronounce this city right here, Gloucestershire, were in court for the announcement. Vince later said that the case had been a terrible waste of time and money, and the settlement barely covered Wyatt's legal fees. He added, "I'm disappointed that the Supreme Court decided not to throw out the case, given it was brought over 30 years since the relationship ended. There clearly needs to be a statute of limitations for divorce cases and a time limit beyond which a claim cannot be made. Such a thing exists in commercial law for good practical reasons. The couple met as students." So The couple met as students. So already any women out there that decide to say that, well, if she put him through college, then she deserves money and all that. They met in college. So college was already being taken care of when he met her. In 1981 is when they met. They were both in their early 20s and lived in a new age traveler lifestyle. They separated in the mid 80s and divorced in 1992. In the mid-90s, Vince began a business career and went on to become a green energy tycoon, which he launched Ecotricity, which is worth 57 million pounds. So they divorced in 1992, and in the mid-90s, which let's say 94, 95, 96, he decided to start a company. After 20 years, the company became worth 57 million pounds. So for anyone to say that because they were divorced, they were married and divorced, and now he's rich after all this was done, that she gets to get a piece of it 20 years later, 30 years later, that is the craziest thing. If men are going to have to worry about becoming successful after they marry a woman and divorce them, up to 20, 30 years later, then what is the incentive to even try to get married? The statistics show that 50% of all marriages fail, and 80% of all marriages, 70% of all marriages to 80% of all marriages are filed by the woman. So with a high failure rate and a high rate of women choosing to walk away from a marriage, and now that there is a legal precedent in Europe, which America follows European laws. When stuff happens in Europe, it usually comes here. So our family courts and divorce courts are already geared heavily against men. So if this starts to come to America, divorces are like, men are not going to get married because of divorce. And this next article I'm going to show you is going to show you that even being in long-term relationships is going to become dicey. The Supreme Court ruled that Lord Wilson said White's claim was legally reconcilable and not an abusive process. He described White as being in poor health and living in a modest house. He said that she sometimes had low-paid jobs and at other times she relied on state benefits. That is not his problem. She shouldn't have divorced the man. They shouldn't have got divorced. Wilson described Vince as a remarkable man who was a traveler with no money in his 20s. But one year at the festival, he rigged up a contraption from which he provided a wind-powered telephone service. It was the start of a business which, as a result of his ingenuity and drive, has led to his manufacturing and sale of green energy on a massive scale. Vince lives with his second wife. So this man's already married. And not only is he already married or remarried, but they've been divorced for 30 years. 30 years. That's ridiculous. That is ridiculous. Okay, so now this next article. This next article here is about an unmarried couple had no children and no house, but man must still pay support, appellate court rules. Now, this happened in September of last year, so this is a newer case. A wealthy businessman will have to pay more than $50,000 a month in spousal support for 10 years to a woman with whom he had a long-term romantic relationship, even though they kept separate houses and had no children together. They had no children together. Like, they had no children together. They didn't have finances together. None of these things were together, but somehow he still has to pay alimony. Oh, man, this is crazy. With whom he had a long-term romantic relationship, even though they kept separate houses. The top courts have ruled under the law, an unmarried couple are considered common law spouses if they have cohabitated. Living together in a relationship continuously for at least 3 years, but that doesn't necessarily mean living in the same home. The court says that the court says that if you live together, then the law is if you live together for 3 years, then you're considered to be married. But the court decided to change the rules and find that if you're together for 3 years, that you're considered to be married. Okay. There have been many cases which court has found cohabitation where the parties stayed together stayed together. The decision comes in the case of Lisa Klinsmann and Michael Latner. Both Toronto, who have been a romantic relationship after meeting in October 2001. At the time, she was 38 and separated with 2 children. Court shows he was 46 and divorced with 3 children. Although they maintain their separate homes, Latner and Clemens behaved as couple both privately and publicly. They vacationed together. He had given her a 7.5 carat diamond ring and other jewelry that she wore. Sorry, guys. I had a neighbor at my door. He gave her a 7.5 carat diamond ring and other jewelry that she wore. She quit her job and would regularly sleep at his house. They traveled together and talked about living together. Latner proposed several times and Clemens accepted. He often referred to her by his last name. However, he insisted she sign a marriage contract and came up with several drafts. She refused. So let's make that clear that he proposed and wanted her to sign a contract and she refused. So she refused the marriage. Throughout the relationship, the two kept separate bank accounts and never owned property in common. Nevertheless, Latner gave Clemens thousands of dollars every month, a credit card, paid off her mortgage, and showered her with expensive gifts. He provided her and her children with a lavish lifestyle, the court found. There was a committed relationship, the court said. When their 14-year-old relationship finally broke down in May of 2015, Clemens asked the court to recognize her as his spouse and order him to pay her support. He argued she had been a travel companion and a girlfriend, nothing more, and as such, he said they were never legally spouses and he owed no support. An 8-day trial ensured in her decision in February 2019. Supreme Court Justice Sharon Shore sided with Clemens. She ruled that there were, in fact, longtime spouses, finding that despite their separate homes, they lived under one roof at Latner's cottage for part of us. They lived under one roof at Latner's cottage for part of a summer and during a winter vacation in Florida. Shores ordered him to pay $53,077 monthly indefinitely. Latner appealed. So let's get this straight. So this woman and him never married. They never lived in the same place together. He asked her to marry him. He wanted her to sign a contract. She denied it. She turned down the marriage. They stayed in a cottage for a summer vacation and in Florida for a winter vacation, and that constitutes them being married. That is crazy. And then to top it off, she's awarded $53,000 a year. Let's do some math here. So 50 times 53,000, $77 times 12. That is $636,924 a year in spousal support for a summer and winter vacation. That is crazy. The higher court leaned heavily on Shore's analysts, finding that she was right to conclude cohabitation can occur when the parties stay together. The appellate court did not find Shore made an error in deciding how long Latner would have to pay support based on why when they first been cohabitating. While Shore had found to be almost from the get-go, the higher court said it wasn't earlier than their first stay together at his cottage, meaning that they did not reach the threshold for indefinite payments. So he was going to have to pay this indefinitely. Instead, it was ordered for him to pay support for 10 years. 10 years. So if you times that $636,924 a year, times that by 10, he has to pay out $6,369,240 for a woman that he never married, that turned down the marriage, and he never lived together with. They just stayed together for a vacation of 6 months. We'll play it long and say 6 months, which doesn't even fall under the law of being together for 3 years. And this dude had to pay this much money. So the reason that I bring up these articles, is because obviously not everyone's going to be able to afford, $6 million in a 10-year period. So like your average guy isn't going to get to pay money like that or have vacation houses and stuff. Like your average guy's not going to have that. But so the law in Canada was just changed to where you don't even have to live together. The laws in England is if you get married and get divorced, after you get divorced and you make a business, that woman can come back and take your money from any money that you made after the divorce. So you don't have to be married and you don't have to live together for women to be able to get spousal support from you. And if you end up getting married and divorced, they can take money from you after the fact, up to 30 years. So with those two laws happening in Europe and Canada, if these come to the state, that is definitely going to drop the amount of men that want to get married, because it is not like, it's one thing to get married and lose half your stuff. Like that's one thing, but it's another thing to get married, lose half your stuff, and then have a woman come take more of your money 20 years later. Like that is crazy. Or to be in a long-term relationship with a woman and have to pay her a bunch of money as if you were married. I just don't see the risk. I just don't see the risk worth the reward benefiting men. And now they're talking about a single tax. And that single tax, if a man's a bachelor and he gets a bachelor tax, paying the bachelor tax wouldn't even be that bad. Paying more money in taxes every year compared to being completely screwed in the court system up to 20 or 30 years after the fact is still better. It would still be better to pay the tax every year. With laws like this being pushed forward in our Western societies, I just don't see how the marriage contract is going to be able to hold. What do you guys think? Do you guys think that if these laws were to come to America, or do you guys think that these laws couldn't come to America? But if they do come to America, it's going to be bad for marriage. men are not going to want to get married at all. And even if any woman wants to make the argument that, well, you know, you're not a high value man or you're not rich, so it doesn't matter to you. No, you're right. But the fact of the matter, these laws together, your average man could get married and divorced and then become wealthy or become rich and then still get screwed. Like, if you told me that I had to pay money to a woman that I was no longer with up to the rest of my life, that I didn't even have kids with, like, well, I probably would not date or have sex again. I'd probably save the money up for a doll and just go that route. For anyone that's in the chat, if you guys think that this is good, bad, if you disagree or agree, come up into the Streamlabs or come up into the StreamYard and tell me what you guys think, because I think that's crazy. I absolutely don't see how marriage could last with that. I don't see how marriage could work. Like the incentive, like getting married and have to be, as a man, getting married and have to be financially responsible for most of the bills and do house chores. Like literally doing the most, having to do a bunch of the housework, a bunch of the kid rearing, pay most of the bills, and then get divorced, lose your stuff, and then have to pay a bunch of money 30 years down the road. That's a lot of risk. Like, that's a lot of risk and not much benefit. Like, that's not a lot of benefit at all for any reason. Like, if they come out with the case where a dude had to pay child support for life, even when the kids were adults, that would be the final nail in the coffin. That would absolutely kill marriage. There'd be no, like, men would not want to reproduce or have kids. Like, wouldn't want to have kids, wouldn't want to get married. Like, I just don't. I just don't see how. I just don't see how that could go any better. And as these laws are becoming more and more restrictive, and the roles of men are the same as they were, like, men's roles are pretty much the same as they've been forever, and women's roles are constantly changing, and women really don't have a set role these days. I just don't see marriage lasting. Like, there might be a bump in marriage here lately because of COVID and, like, economic reasons, things that are going on in the market. But as of right now, going into the future, I don't see this bump in marriages lasting. But guys, that's just my thoughts. If you guys can find any articles or you can see any stories of people getting married or anything to counter this argument, go ahead and send it to me on my email or hit me up on Instagram. But I just don't see it ending well. This is just bad. As you guys know, stay savage.